This mini lecture deals with Horney's psychoanalytic social theory. The root of her theory lies in the ideas of basic hostility and basic anxiety. Horney believed that when children do not receive the basic sense of security and freedom from fear from parents, and parents can do this through a number of ways. They can either outright neglect and not be there for their children, or they may not respond to the child's need in a way that feels secure and is fulfilling. So the basic hostility develops. This is a feeling that the child has towards towards the parents. It is not um, conscious. However, because it's such a scary feeling, children are motivated to repress this. But the repressed feelings, as you know from Freud's perspective, don't always stay repressed. And so anxiety develops. So this is this pervasive feeling that they will not be taken care of, that their hostility may come out and out of this resentment. So what do children do with this basic anxiety, this pervasive feeling of helplessness and loneliness? This is really the foundation of Horney's idea of neurosis. This motivates the child as they grow up to develop self-protective mechanisms. And there are a number of ways a child tries to protect himself or herself from anxiety by four methods: by securing affection and love. So, in effect, they're saying, if you love me, you will not hurt me. And there are many ways in which people might try to gain affection, like trying to do whatever other people want, trying to bribe others, or sometimes threatening others into providing the affection. Another self-protective mechanism is being submissive. Here, the means of self-protection involves complying with other people's wishes and surrendering their own needs and desires. In the sense that if I give in to you, you will not leave me, or you will not hurt me. One can also protect ourselves against anxiety through achieving power over others. In other words, the person try to compensate from helplessness through success, through a sense of superiority, by being more powerful, by attaining freedom from dependence. The last way of protecting oneself against basic anxiety involves staying away from people or withdrawing, not just physically, but also psychologically. So these are the four protective mechanisms, and the goal is to defend against anxiety. That is the single goal. Now, all of us have these various mechanisms in one form or another. The difference for neurotic personality is that they tend to be very rigid in their self-protective mechanisms. Karen Horney also proposed 10 different neurotic needs that the neurotic personality has, and these needs are you see this in the next slide, but there are 10 needs, and they can be grouped in 3 different trends. Trends are essentially categories of behaviors and attitudes that that one expresses towards others. Neurotic needs are irrational defenses that become a permanent part of personality. So here are the needs and trends. You can see that every individual, neurotic or otherwise, have some of these needs to some degree. But what makes these needs neurotic is this intensive, compulsive pursuit that their satisfaction be met in these specific ways. So the needs are affection and approval, dominant partner, power, exploitation, prestige, admiration, achievement, self-sufficiency, perfection, and narrow limits to life. So the trends, there are 3 trends: moving toward people, which describes the compliant personality; The compliant personality are folks who display attitudes and behaviors that reflect a desire to move towards people. That's why it's called movement towards people. So a person with this type of compliant personality has very intense and desperate need for affection and approval. They need to be loved, to be wanted, to be protected. So compliant personalities can manipulate other people, particularly their partners, to achieve these goals, to get affection, to get approval. And then you have folks who express a trend of moving against people. These are aggressive personalities. So they try to excel and achieve power. They want recognition. They want to feel secure from anxiety by affirming their superiority over others. So these are individuals who may not feel the need to appease or get approval just for the sake of approval. They will argue and criticize and demand and do whatever is necessary to achieve superiority and power. So this trend protects the individual against anxiety, and that if they are superior to you, they shouldn't feel threatened by you. The last trend describes folks with detached personality. These are movement away from people. These individuals try to protect themselves against anxiety by maintaining emotional distance. So they want to feel superior, they want to feel independent, but not in the same way as aggressive personalities. These folks want to be self-sufficient, so they don't depend on you. They want to feel perfect, so they don't need anyone. And they tend to live in a narrow boundaries in terms of their life. Don't really go out of their comfort zones very much. So Kornai found that in the neurotic individual, one of these trends dominant, whereas and the other two tends to be around for with less intensity or degree. And as you can see, in this system, there's quite a bit of conflict. There's some incompatibility between the trends. And this is what she calls conflict. This conflict is the core of neurosis. Keep in mind that for a few people who are not neurotic, these trends can all be expressed depending on the circumstances. A normal person is flexible in their behavior and attitudes, and so they can adapt to changing situations. Let's see. Other concepts related to the neurotic personality is the idealized self-image. Now, Horney believes that we all, normal and neurotic, have a picture of ourselves that may or may not be based on reality. Among normal people, she believes that self-image is built on realistic appraisals of their abilities, potentials, weaknesses, or relationships with other people. So based on the feedback we get from our environment, from other folks, we develop a picture of ourselves. And this image provides a sense of unity and integration in the personality, and it helps us to develop how we approach others or our attitudes towards ourselves. Neurotics, on the other hand, they often experience incompatible modes of behavior. So their personalities are often in a state of disunity or disharmony. So they construct an idealized self-image that is not based on reality. So this idealized self-image are often very extreme, very inflexible and perfectionistic. So they try to achieve this idealized self-image, but because it doesn't coincide with reality, they are doomed to fail. So, for instance, if an individual has an idealized picture of themselves, they must be loved by everyone, otherwise they will not be able to stand it. It is an impossible standard to be loved by everyone. There will be people who do not like you or don't respond to you in ways that you expect. So they then feel incredibly disappointed and they're let down in very extreme ways. This ties to the concept of tyranny of the shoulds. So, in an attempt to idealize their self-image, they fail because it's an unattainable standard. So they then instead of reflecting on the failures and readjusting what that self-image is, they double down and they try harder to attain this goal, this impossible goal of perfection. So they continue to go into this cycle of failing and trying harder and failing and trying harder, which is very destructive. And one way that neurotics try to defend themselves against these conflicts is by externalizing and essentially blaming others, projecting the conflict into the outside world to explain their inability to attain the self-image, the idealized self-image. So that's all that I want to make sure I want to highlight with psychoanalytic social theory. It's a very important theory in that it has been used and in many different contemporary forms of therapy approaches. Her ideas are also unique in the sense that it focuses principally on neurotic personality. And that's it for now. Feel free to post questions you might have on the discussion forum, where your classmates and I will respond to questions and comments you might have about Hornight's lecture.